So welcome, Carla. Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to dive into the work of movement generation and all the incredible things that you do. But before we do that, I'd love to hear a little bit about your personal journey to this work. Like, what's led you to be a community organizer?
Wow, that can be a very long story. So I'm going to just choose a couple of really key elements for me. It's really informed by my life experience. My family comes from Mexico and El Salvador in Central America. And my parents immigrated here and experienced a lot of, my father in particular experienced a lot of racism when he immigrated here. As a 20-year-old, he was, involved in a lot of meaningful work in Mexico before that. I experienced a lot of militarism in El Salvador, where my mother's family is, who then I later found out, of course, they're military and paramilitary that were trained by the School of the Americas, hosted here in the United States. So a lot of my politic was shaped by my experience as being part of an immigrant family, including watching my family and other families in Latin America sort of really desiring to climb the social ladder towards sort of US status, and seeing really the deep psychology that is wielded, out of the US, out of, Western thinking and powers and influences, and how they demoralize people of other backgrounds basically and make them feel like I need to be that or else I'm not good enough. And so I also was really influenced by my father's love of the earth and nature, and then witnessing in my own experience growing up the decline of air quality, the decline of water quality. I'm a Bay Area native, and so I've been watching the skies change. I've been watching the seasons change. I've lived here my whole life. I've been watching the water change. The bay is not the same color it was when I was a child. So that, and then kind of putting environmentalism and or earthism, ecology together with systems of oppression and discrimination, in particular around farm worker struggles, identifying again with people from, the countries that my parents come from and my family is from, watching how farm worker issues really brought together racism, xenophobia, all of the patriotism and environmental harm, and a health crisis, and how a health crisis is also a result of structural racism. So all of those things kind of swirled together. I grew up in a very mixed community with a lot of Black folks, Pacific Islanders, just very diverse people of color, and also our experience and how we were treated by the police when we were young versus, the white students that we went to school with. So just, kind of all of those things came together, and it became towards support population in political power at the expense of everyone else's dignity, happiness, health, and our lives.
So you just cut out there, but just after you said this coming together.
It all came together in a way that I could see how it was all happening on purpose, that it was by design, these systems of oppression, right? When that kind of really became clear to me, this is not an accident. This is serving somebody. Somebody's benefiting from our oppression, from our suffering, from our lack of freedom, from the psychology that we feel now less than. There's a benefit to others in power. And I have a strong spirit and a fighter spirit. So it didn't take too long for that to turn into, oh no, we can't have this, and start organizing.
That's so interesting. And I think, when you had that realization that these systems have been designed this way, then there's also that other realization, well, if they've been designed this way, if they've been man-made, then they can also be changed by women and by men, you know, they're not stuck like this. These aren't natural systems, that it's not natural law, some kind of thing that can never be changed. And
That's
something
right.
that I find funny about, you know, when people talk about the economy, kind of talk about the economy like it can never be changed, but it's constantly being changed and reinforced and challenged every single day. And it's been
Yeah.
created by humans, and it's so unnatural that it can obviously be changed by humans as well. You mentioned a couple of times psychology. I'd love if you could
Mm.
speak a little bit more to that, because I think we don't appreciate enough the role of psychology in both the systems which are causing oppression, and also the the kind of obstacles to really vibrant social movements and empowered communities who are taking action to change them.
Yeah. Yeah, I that's actually one of the things that I really I kind of geek out on a little bit on my own, you know,
Mm.
thinking about yeah, the psychological warfare that we're engaged in or that we've been subject to. Um, things that are familiar to people, you know, here on Turtle Island, um, the United States, the Americas, that I'm, you know, the history that I'm familiar with, it was quite intentional, right? The creating the narrative that of superiority and inferiority. We are better because you are savage, you are wild, you are uncouth, you are unacceptable, you're only part human. All those things, whether it's a direct communication like that, or even more sometimes when it's displayed, right, through actions. So by saying, we're going to save everyone but you know, or we're going to design this whole thing so that everyone else gets a home, but you don't get a home. We're going to put all the toxic industry that spews pollution that can kill you, can kill your children, your unborn children, right next to your house, right? All of those things, they don't have to be spoken directly. They are experienced directly. And never mind the media and the narratives of the government, which the media informs, right? The narratives of, I'm sorry, the government informs the narratives that the media puts out. And so it's a very intelligent operation to really paint a picture of who we all should be in this society. And the psychology of that then internalizes, and we, you know, people end up internalizing that and then playing out their role. I don't know how many times I've heard a young, you know, Black or brown, indigenous young person say, well, screw it. Like, they all think I'm this, I'm gonna just be that then. So there,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it's really, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because it was not funny at all. It's devastating that
Yeah.
we kind of live in these cultures, well, yeah, kind of in these cultures that assume that we have moved beyond, you know, the time of mythology and storytelling. And yet there are so many stories that we tell ourselves. There are so many cultural stories which because they're not seen as religious, they're not even questioned. So we have like the myth of capitalism, the myth of a growth-based economy, the myth of progress, like these ideas, these stories that are so far removed from reality, that we can't almost even question them anymore. And we don't realize how they they're so insidious that they kind of become embedded within us, and then they become the stories that we tell ourselves as well. And
Mhm.
because they're not spoken about, they're very hard to see. And speaking about the narratives that you've experienced growing up, um
Yeah.
like anything that undermines or challenges like a capitalist system of like empower over paradigm is then seen as like primitive and less than, and like and kind of seen as like not the masculine progress growth based economy. I mean, I might be being way too binary here, but like
And you know what's one of the most irritating things about that you just named is that all of the modern, so many of the modern tools, medicines, like things that modern society rests upon indigenous, savage, land-based, backwards, pre-colonial, non-capitalistic communities, peoples, indigenous peoples in relationship to place that have centuries old ecological knowledge, and that knowledge and their relationship to that place wherever they are has conserved, preserved the plants, the minerals, the oils, all the things that the capitalist apparatus uses to move its agenda. Would not have any of these things without the communities that have been keepers of the earth all this time. And so it's just, for me, it's real important in my thinking and whenever I talk to people to distinguish between knowledge and wisdom, or intellect and wisdom. I mean, people are super smart. The oppressors are really, really intelligent. They have the means to gather a lot. They've convinced us all to walk around and record ourselves for them, so they can use all of our information against us whenever they want. Smart. Wise? No, not an ounce of wisdom, not an ounce of it. Who bites the hand that feeds them? Who scorches the field that grows their food? Who poisons the water they can't live without? I mean, it's just, it's so obvious. I don't have to say more about it, but it's really important not to confuse intellect with wisdom.
I completely agree. And, we kind of look at these so-called advanced economies, which are literally destroying the planet and the ecosystems, which are the only thing that can keep us alive and give us any kind of quality of life. So we're talking about enhancing quality of life whilst destroying the very things that give us it in the first place. And then we call it an advanced economy. It's so unbelievable how idiotic that thinking is.
Yeah.
And the fact that that's the mainstream and that it's caused this much damage, it's once you start to unpick it, you're like, how's it possible? How's this possible?
That's one of the psychological things too, that advancement and progress and everything has become synonymous with technological complexity. It's like now the only thing we consider advanced is something that's more intricate, more complex technologically, to the point that we don't even understand half of the things that we use to make our life move in this modern way. When really, how advanced was it to talk about advanced? When you look 7 generations ahead, that's advanced.
Absolutely.
When you can design and uphold and maintain a way of living that ensures beyond the shadow of a doubt that 7 generations down your bloodline, the children will still have clean water, will still have a safe place to live, will still know their origin stories, will still understand, that the collective is more important than the individual. That's advanced thinking, like literally,
Yeah, exactly.
So.
I'd love to hear kind of your opinion on what meaningful action is, because I think that the world is waking up, who haven't been forced to wake up because of that they're living the crisis, the climate and ecological crisis. And for example, EcoResolution started out as a kind of pledge making campaign, and we wanted to get like social media, like just more conversations around the climate, because 2 years ago there really wasn't much going on, and it was great, but very quickly it started to feel very superficial, because it was my resolution is to reduce the amount of plastic I use, or to reduce the amount of clothes I buy, which is all really important, really good stuff. Like, I'm not saying that it's not important, it is, it's part of it. But like, we relaunched at the beginning of this year because we wanted to explore how we can take transformative action beyond the consumer shifts, because, you know,
Right.
whilst a lot, millions of people doing that adds up to a lot, it does not add up to the kind of systemic transformations that we need to see. So
Right.
for you, what does transformative action or meaningful action mean?
Thank you for asking that. And I just want to apologize for the construction. I don't know if you can hear it, but
It's all good. It's all good.
okay. I appreciate you bringing that up, and I'm going to speak to the individual action and responsibility quickly, because that's something that's kind of gone a couple of rounds in the movement communities here, where it's like, at first, you know, we know that our people, our communities are targeted for those kind of things, right? Buy this light bulb instead, get this green thing, this organic one, this, you know, all those things. And as a response, say, hey, this isn't about individual, it's not about consuming, and B, it's not about individual action, just as you named. I've talked to a lot of community members that, you know, upon saying, hey, we're not going to use water bottles at this event, please bring, oh, it's not about, you know, the scale of me buying a water bottle is not going to affect the problem. But there's a different aspect to that I think is really important, which is it's about us being in integrity with our values. Just because my one rain barrel outside is not going to change, or my 1,500 gallons of rainwater that I can catch is not going to affect the water crisis. But I am in integrity with my values and principles about being in relationship with the elements that feed me, that I need. I'm growing my understanding of, what does a water budget mean? Oh, I have to pay attention to how much rain there is and how much water I'm using towards what things. That's, you know, part of what I think transformative action is, that I'll talk about in a moment. So I do think that individual choices are really important, because we have to practice. We have to practice detaching from the mentality that, like, we should just have whatever we want. Talk about psychology. That's so deeply ingrained. I shouldn't have to go without anything that I want.
To quickly jump in there, I completely agree, because it's like, I find that everyone gets stuck in this either or mentality with crisis, where it's like, it's either individual or it's systemic. It's like, no, it's both.
It's both.
They're connected, and every time you go out of your way to make the right decision, that's showing you that there is a systemic issue that needs to be addressed, because the systems that are in place should make it easy to do good stuff, to make the right decision.
That's excellently said. The systems in place should make it easy for you to do things in the right way. So there's two things I was thinking about in terms of transformative action. There's so much to say about that, but I think I'll start with the example I just started with, around collecting water. I'm a permaculturalist. Also, I started learning indigenous permaculture in 2006. And one of the principles I really like, because all of the principles I love, but one that really applies to organizing is called succession of evolution. And it's recognizing that certain elements in a system prepare or pave the way for systems to support other things in the future, right? So an action that you take now is not just about the consequence of that action, but that action prepares and paves the way for further important action in the future. And so, you know, just thinking about the example that I gave of collecting rainwater, I'm doing that in my yard, let's say, and I'm learning all of those things that I just mentioned. So it's not just a rote action. It's not just a physical, a material action. I'm not just installing something that will capture this valuable, you know, material of life, water, that then I'm going to use for material purposes, whether plants or washing. I am learning something. I'm experiencing something different than what this whole system has taught me. I'm in relationship to the water. It's not going to just come out of my faucet from, you know, a river that's far away that's affecting indigenous land somewhere. I have no idea what's in the pipes that it came through. I don't have to think about how much I'm using because it's seemingly endless. I have no idea what it takes for that water to keep coming out of my faucet. How can I change anything about the water system when I have no idea really how it works? So through installing a rainwater catchment system in my home, like I said, I'm not just mindlessly catching water. It's an opportunity to understand, oh, how do I think about how much rain we're expecting this year? And how much can I capture? How much do I typically use? So then that sparks mindfulness. Oh, I should be, how much am I using in my garden or towards these other things? Well, how about my neighbors? What if we expanded that, right? To talking to my neighbors, and now we all have water systems. Now we can talk about a budget across homes. Now we can think about mutual aid. When there's a crisis any day, you know, if you live in California, I've been here my whole life. My whole life, we've been waiting for the big one, the big earthquake, right? Another, 1906 earthquake. They say it will come. So at any moment, if you live here, like everything could get shut off, the power, the gas, the water, the streets, and you have to be prepared. So now we're learning something that could actually help us in a true crisis. Nowadays, it's more the fires in the East Bay Hills that are 10 minutes from my house. I mean, there's not a fire there, but we've been under red flag warning for weeks because of the winds and the heat and the drought. Or it could be, a protest that happens downtown, which is 5 minutes from my house, where we have had Nazi activity, where we have had brute police force, where there have been killings by police and by other, radical rogue fascists. So what if that happens? And right? So transformative actions provide the opportunity for individuals and communities to expand beyond just the immediate impact of this action. It's an opportunity to learn how to create and manage systems on a community level to meet our needs. And then you just kind of could scale up from there. That could be a whole neighborhood thing. It could become a city thing, right? We have to grow one step at a time. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just love that so much. And I think that's a realization that we had, was like, the individual is so important, but in that it can ignite and mobilize its own community, its own family, its own network. And like, that's when like not only can it become a more enjoyable experience, but also the effects can ripple out like so much more. And I love what you're saying about this transformative action is also about learning new ways of being in the world, new ways of relating to the elements of life, to the things that sustain us, that kind of birth us and are with us all the time. And how can, so it's not like, activism is like something tag on, like, oh, I'll take my keep cup with me to wherever you,
Right.
to the fossil fuel job or something. Not there's anything wrong with the people who work within fossil fuels, it's a system. But
Yes.
but yeah, it's it is the way that we are experiencing and engaging in life, which I always see as like a kind of journey of learning and of exploration, and of hopefully doing that in community. And another thing that I love as well, that when you're speaking about catching rainwater, it's like you've identified an issue of waste and wastefulness, and there's been and the water crisis, and then there's like a clear solution as to like what you can do. So it's also like there's like disorder or disharmony in something, and then you as a live being can actively participate in creating more harmony or more order, and like relieving something
Yeah.
there. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah.
that's kind of how I see what you said.
Yeah, thank you for that reflection. And, you know, in all of the examples we could give, another example I was thinking of was, you know, there's a project here in on the border of Berkeley and Oakland called the Self-Help Hunger Program, run by a dear, dear comrade named Auntie Frances, goes by Auntie Frances, who's a Black Panther, and has a lunch program, a free lunch program for houseless people in this particular area on the border of Berkeley and Oakland. So I want to give her a lot of props in her project. But I was thinking too, you know, what's transformative about that? There's hard skills that you learn, and there's soft skills or emotional skills or people skills. I've worked with her and other projects like that. And there's also, you know, it's not like I didn't learn a ton of hard skills myself, like serving food or bringing food. That wasn't necessarily a hard skill. What I did learn, and what I saw other people learning that were working with her, was how to be in relationship with the houseless community.
Mm.
You know, just to be completely real. When you're not a houseless person, and especially if you don't come from poor means, where you lacked, you know, basic resources like a home and a vehicle or clothing that you could replace on a regular basis, people feel awkward about relating to people who live on the street. It's a whole, you know, you feel awkward because you have and they don't. And so one of the things that I saw that was so beautiful was that bridging of people who are housed, and sort of have like a typical level of means, you know, income, vehicle, things like that, homes, being in relationship with houseless people,
Mm.
and just breaking down those barriers, and again learning something that you never learned, because when I grew up, people on the street were totally othered. And as a matter of fact, it was kind of like, keep your kids away, you don't know, you know. um and so it's, and same, you know, with the mutual aid, you learn how to engage with, not all my neighbors are leftists at all, right? Some people find the cops really important, but you know what? They're in my ecosystem here. I am bioregionally related to them. I am related to them through place and in place. And I have to learn how to work with them if there's a crisis, even if they want to call the cops and I don't, even if they want to vote for somebody that I would never vote for, you know, or whatnot. And so those soft skills or people skills, heart skills, are just as important as the hard technical skills.
Yeah.
The other last thing I wanted to say about transformative action is, again, they have to be multidimensional and like holistic is the word that I want to say. You know, speaking of the sort of the approach that we were talking about of, you know, the global powers that be, it's really clear that that part of the problem with like typical or Western thinking around governance is that it applies solely intellectual thinking to a world of human issues that is far from solely intellectual, right? Where is the heart? Where is the spirit? Where is the care in the thinking that has brought this world to where it is today? Where is the reflection of spiritual guidance in policies and regulations that allow tearing the earth apart and making irreversible damage, all for short-lived things and products, right? We can take an opportunity to expand ourselves and tap into our emotional awareness, our spiritual awareness or guidance, and even our physical awareness. You know, we're also kind of taught to really be up here and not listen to our bodies as much. We're not taught or encouraged to respond to intuition, right? Our bodies, when you get a hot flash or when your stomach feels nervous or you get your skin crawls, that's your body picking up, you know, signals, and it's telling you, hey, algo no está bien, something's not right, you know?
Mm.
And we don't listen to that. It's like, oh, whatever, what does my brain say? And that's all we go, you know. So when we work on even tactical solutions that are largely intellectual, I just think we have to we have to expand into all of those aspects of ourselves to create interventions and solutions for a world where all of those aspects of ourselves are affected.
That's so interesting, and it's making me think of what Pat McCabe says, or what she said that her some of her teachers teach, is that what we're currently facing right now is a crisis of relationship. And so in that way, kind of at the heart of so many of these systemic issues that we're facing and challenges is disconnection. And so like, kind of seeing transformative action through the lens of how it allows us to like step back into relationship, whether that's with like our full existence beyond our intellect, like our emotional, spiritual, existence, or with the houseless people that we walk by every day, or whether it's with like the water systems. It's like realizing how interconnected our existence is, and then being able to step up to actively participate in assisting that. Like Pat also speaks about, the hoop of life and upholding the honor of being human being, which I always find so beautiful and so inspiring. Movement generation talk about just transition, which also feels like a very meaningful action. And just transition is a phrase that I only came across this year, and it encapsulates so much. And I'd love if you could speak to what just transition means and why it's so important for anyone who's envisioning heading towards more regenerative cultures.
Sure. Yeah. You actually said something earlier that is my favorite way to describe the meaning of just transition framework, which is that it is about a way of being. And I want to credit one of my colleagues at MG named Lael, who brought that statement forward for us. And it has resonated for me more than any other way of talking about the strategic framework for just transition. But, it is a framework for literally transitioning at a societal level from an extractive way of life to a generative or regenerative way of life. But it really is this framework for a way of being. It's a reminder of a worldview that was once everyone's worldview, right? Caring and sharing, basically, sacredness. It's a framework for a way of relating to the gifts of the earth, and even us in our first rendition of the framework, we refer to them as natural resources, which now just sounds like such a bad word. I can't wait for a reprint of the Just Transition zine. I mean, in the extractive mindset, that's exactly what they are. So in there, we keep it that way. But when we're talking about a regenerative way of life, they are gifts of the earth, or another term that another comrade here brought forward was life sources, which is the term we're starting to use. They're sources of life, right? Yes. So it's a reminder of all of those things. It's a reminder to each other to see each other as co-working together, right? In terms of how we address or hold human labor and activity. We are co-workers, holding the events of life for our people. Whether we are constructing a place to live, or we are growing and harvesting food, whether we are caring for children or elders, or people who need assistance and helping and moving through the world, whether we're mediating conflict or governing, a watershed. It reminds us that we are basically co-workers, all of us, in maintaining bioregional health and relationships in a good way, so that we can get to that future, right? And it reminds us, it's a suggestion that everyone can live well when we focus on collective health and well-being, right? And when we get really humble, for me, it reminds us to be really humble and remember that without the earth and each other, we have nothing. We have nothing. And there's all of the technical pieces of the framework, which are really important as well, changing the rules, moving the resources, moving the money, you know, all of those, the clean energy, right? Transitioning from dirty to clean and non-extractive forms of producing electricity. I don't like to also conflate energy only as electricity. Energy is the lifeblood of our spirit as well. So we're really talking about electrical energy, right? And cleaner forms of producing that. All those technical pieces are really important. Because if you take a new technology, a clean technology out of the framework, you could run it just as capitalistically. You could abuse labor, you could abuse, you know, women and queer people, you can do all the things, right? So without the values that the framework is couched in, all of those technical shifts, they could lead to little or no difference at all in how we experience the world. And yeah, I just want to say that the framework was also like the product of a lot of thinking that came before it. And if people are looking at Movement Generation's work, I really encourage folks to look at our article and any slides we have up on resilience-based organizing, on ecological justice, and sort of, you know, really the values and analysis that underlie the just transition framework. Too much to go into in this interview, but I encourage people to seek those things out.
Thank you so much. I was reading about it earlier, actually, doing some research, and I think it's on the Just Transition Alliance, and they write, you know, transition is inevitable, justice is not, as in, you know, that a transition is going to be happening because, like, the science is right, climate change and ecological breakdown and biodiversity loss is happening at a scary rate. So transition is happening, even if it doesn't feel like it is. And but the justice is not inevitable. And this is why, for me personally, like the social movements and the activism and civilian participation, you know, human participation in this transition is so important, and also centering conversations around environmental policy, centering, you know, human rights at the center of it, you know, understanding how environmental racism operates, and also having a very clear understanding of what false solutions are. This is something my sister, who I kind of run everything with, and I are banging our heads against at the moment, because there's all these kind of supposed solutions popping up, but really it's just a continuation of extraction, a continuation of the commodification of nature, a continuation of isolating power towards corporations and towards political elites. And the kind of the biggest one for me personally, like not the biggest one, but the one that I'm feeling is like so insidious at the moment, is talking about the climate crisis as though it's a crisis of carbon. So now everything is about zero net, reduce carbon, reduce carbon. But that's because that can play so easily back into capitalism. You know,
exactly.
They can justify these, like the complete removal of people from land and the industrialization of agriculture by saying that it's going to reduce carbon. And it's these things which are really scary if, like you say, you know, we're not taking a holistic perspective, and understanding human rights and prioritizing not just carbon, but justice, freedom, and liberation for all people.
That's right. That's right. Thank you for uplifting that. I mean, there's a really popular notion these days about, and it has been for several years now, of reducing our footprint, right? It's like there's all these things you can do to see, like, what is your footprint, your eco footprint, you know? And at Movement Generation, we'd like to think about increasing our footprint. You know, where is our print on restoring waterways? Where is our print on rebuilding soil? You know, when the colonizers came here, they wrote in reports that so much of the land look like well-maintained national parks, you know, and like that's been written, you know, many times. And it's because there were people there, because people were in relationship to that place. They were tending the wild, so to speak, and they were in relationship with animals and herds and migration and plants and waterways, not in a way that was extractive, but in a way that did have an imprint. It did have an impact, but it was an impact that didn't that didn't destroy the place. And I don't want to over romanticize. Okay, there were definitely some tribes. I know in my lineage, there were some Mexican Indian tribes that were outstripping their forest base and water. But you know what happened back then was, well, if that happened, you had to move on to a different piece of land, or your people died and your population went down and things changed. That's, you know, at that scale, it was more like a paper cut, right? Like I think we mentioned this in the zine, that the earth could recover from that. But now that we've, you know, globalized the economy and the means to meeting the capitalist economic agenda, we've globalized our ecosystem and we've globalized the mismanagement of home. And so, yes, these false solutions now, it's like everyone's trying to grab one to still, you know, just hold on. It's, you know, again, the psychology, we're so comfortable. I know it's bad. Everyone's saying it's bad. It's falling apart. I can see it falling apart around me, but I don't actually know anything else. And I have a little power here. So I just don't want it to go anywhere, you know? So people are holding on and trying to find their niche in the false solutions landscape. And, you know, we're very clear that anything that's proposed as a solution, but creates a new social or ecological problem or exacerbates a previously existing social or ecological problem, is not a solution. And that's how we distinguish between the two.
Totally. And I think that, you know, we all need to be really discerning over these next few years, as governments will increasingly have to adopt policies. Be like, who is benefiting from these policies, and what is the thinking, like what is the framework behind those policies? Because if it's the same framework that's gotten us to this place, it's not going to be transformative enough, and we need to go back and rethink. And I think that, you know, we are in crisis, it is an emergency, but then my issue with that language is also, but it's not so much of an emergency that we should stop thinking and just run like in any direction we first think.
Right. That's right.
Because like you say,
that's right.
with globalization, with you know, decision making so divorced from the land which it impacts, you know, people kind of try and come up with these big sweeping solutions that are going to solve all the issues and they're going to make loads of money. And actually they need to be, you know, the local communities are the best place to be able to know what their land, not there, but, you know, the ecosystems that they're a part of are really needing. And Carla, I know that you run a really cool program, I think the resiliency and permaculture projects within Movement Generation. And I'd love if you could tell me about these and how this kind of fits into your community organizing work.
Sure. Actually, this is kind of what led me to Movement Generation. It's a really beautiful story for me. I was mentioning that I went to my first permaculture design course in 2006. I learned from the Traditional Native American Farmers Association in New Mexico here. And at the time, I was working for an environmental justice organization called Communities for a Better Environment here in California, a very prominent EJ group that has offices and organizing in Southern California and then here in the Bay Area. And just becoming really frustrated with the limitations of, you know, going after oil refineries for penalties that they should be getting because they were only supposed to pollute 200 tons a year and they polluted 250 tons a year. Or, you know, it's just like, oh my gosh, this is not enough. And I I am not saying that to make less of the efforts of communities that are still working on that, because it is critical. For someone who lives right next door to that refinery, those extra 50 tons could be the difference between life and death for somebody, but it's not making systemic change, right? And so after I came back from the permaculture course, again, remembering that I'm also very informed all the time by my spiritual values, right? That course really just, the experience there with the people where I was in my life at that time just really brought everything clearly together. Like, oh, there's no difference actually between my spiritual values and my political values. And knowledge of and relationship to the land is a place where both of those come together inextricably. And I realized, in all the political education that I had been involved with, working with folks around understanding systems of oppression and learning how to advocate or how to understand the refinery and how we can make changes, or information around health, and all the different kind of education that I had been involved in, said if we're not learning to relate to the earth again, if we're not learning how to understand the most basic elements that we rely on to live, again, transformative action, where is it? Where is the transformation in only reducing the pollution from a refinery by 50 tons a year? Or, changing the president of the board, that governs air quality. This is not what's affecting, again, long-term change, advanced thinking, 7 generations out. What are we going to need? People will need to know their water. They will need to understand air. They will need to know the soil, how to produce food for themselves, how to make basic things, even basic construction, how to work with the earth. We've done a lot of natural building. So anyway, all of this to me, I had a prayer ceremony for myself. And I said, I need to find my path from here, because all I know is that the next move for me is it has to involve this. We have to bring people back into an opportunity to know the elements that they depend on for life, and be in relationship with them, and bring that together with all the systems of oppression and the policy and everything else that we have been working on together. So I prayed for her that, and I didn't know how it was going to come. And then Movement Generation knocked on my door, literally the first 2 staff people. MG used to have a previous iteration before it was the Justice and Ecology Project. But I was thankfully given the opportunity at MG to start the Earth Skills program, which began with seasonal workshops that are not just skills building workshops. It's not just like, just show up and we're going to get to it and learn how to install this water system or how to build a compost system. It all starts with, why are we doing this? Why does this matter to people, oppressed communities that are organizing for liberation? Why are we learning about the pH of the soil, or how many gallons a year you're going to collect off this roof and how to calculate that, or how to build a small structure out of cob and the materials that you have in the ground around here? Why does that matter? And what I mentioned before, learning, practicing self-governance, being in relationship and being in integrity, learning how to work with each other again, because all of those services have been, given over to agencies that we have no relationship to as an agency or as a person, like the people who they are. And then that finally culminated in putting together a permaculture course that we called Permaculture for the People. Our spin on permaculture, calling it Liberation Permaculture. Here in the US, permaculture is very elitist, as you may or may not know, I'm not sure. But the vast majority of people who engage in permaculture are more wealthy, privileged white folks that want to practice it in their yards, kind of more of a personal thing. And so we took that and said, no, this is about applying it at scale with community organizations that hold land, and where applying permaculture design will benefit the whole community in a transformative way. People are going to learn new things And again, just as much as the technical skills, they're going to learn to be in relationship and understand elements again. And that's going to change everything about how they see their path forward towards liberation. Yeah.
That's amazing. I think, like, you know, being able to dedicate like your life to assisting and like facilitating people to become like empowered and in connection enough to be able to grow their own food and do that in harmony with the ecosystem. And I think we have this terrible idea at the moment that like humans are the virus kind of thing, when it's so not. That
Right.
it's really sad, but that is how a lot of people feel. But it's not. It's like, no, we can, and we have done, like you were saying before, existed in deep harmony with the ecosystems and actually been contributing to them and been a regenerative force within it. It's actually quite recent that that's been so catastrophically not the case.
That's right.
And I think, permaculture and these like resiliency projects are just, I think, the most important part of transformative action from my perspective, because you're showing people how to take like localized impact that not only heals their own health but also the health of the community, and then into the land as well. How are the projects going? Like, are they popular? What's some of the effects? How's it all kind of coming out in a practical sense?
Yeah. They're going well. Right now, we're obviously on a hiatus because of the pandemic. So we actually just made the very difficult decision to not, move forward with an Earth Skills program. We were considering different formats that we could engage, but we're going to wait until there's a little more security and at least being outdoors together, spring and summer of next year.
Yeah.
But that said, the second permaculture for the people course that we held in 2015, we were fortunate to have learned from the first one and were able to improve upon it. And one of the things that we did is in each permaculture design course, there's always a design project. So you take everything you've been learning throughout the course and then you apply it to a physical site, right? A lot of times that's just the place where you happen to be taking the course, you use a place there, or you bring photos of a place back home or something like that. But in this course, the design teams were the land plots of these 4 organizations here in the Bay Area. And I am so happy to say that so much of their design of the site designs that were produced have been implemented at those sites. So now we have, these 4 sites that, have water catchment, that have natural, different elements in each one, that have natural building, have new composting and growing systems in place, have alternative energy systems in place, whether it's, a small solar or wind mechanism. And the people are working together to design, because it's also not just about, again, it's not just about physical production, how much food and water, but it's about a space where everyone's needs can be met. So most of these have a ceremonial space, or, a learning, an outdoor classroom space, or an outdoor kitchen. It's about building community and sharing and, practicing being in that way together. So those projects are just, they're just beautiful and flourishing, and they've continued to be a source of inspiration for people here who are looking for how to apply permaculture in, towards collective liberation.
That's so exciting. Thanks for explaining that a little bit more. I'd love to ask one more question, and that's about vision, because this year it has taught me really the power of vision and the importance of vision, and I think your work in permaculture speaks to that a little for me. But I'd love to hear a little bit about the vision that informs and kind of supports all the incredible work that you do.
Thank you for asking that. I have to say the dominant thought that comes to mind is, or vision that comes across my mindscape is picturing what I want for the people that I love, and my gratitude to Great Spirit for the earth and everything that we have. You know, when I'm gonna get emotional, you know, but I have two daughters, one's 20, one's 9. My 9-year-old, she's really active and she's really thirsty. I think about her because she's always like, Mommy, I need water. She always wants to drink water. And there's not water nearby, she gets really like, kind of antsy. And I break down every once in a while, like imagining her in the future wanting water and not having any, you know, and that feels really scary. My older daughter, she has anxiety, you know, and I think about the kind of surroundings in community and in society and how they make her feel so anxious, you know, the violence in the streets, the police, the protesting, the truly, you know, the real violent protesting of like the right wingers and the cops. And I imagine what kind of world and surroundings help her feel calm, grounded, held, safe, you know. So I think about my children and what they need, and they're just two people with these particular little ways that they have and needs that they have, and they're not, you know, they're not outlandish needs, you know, feeling secure and safe, having enough water to be hydrated all the time, having close proximity to loved ones. These are the things that matter to them. Having access to the earth, you know, loving my kids, they love to go to the ocean, walk in the forest. So those are just the basic things. And I think about them at my age and wanting them to be able to experience life and family in a way where they can feel themselves as a part of the world around them, as part of their ecosystem, as part of their social ecosystem, as much as their environmental ecosystem. And I think about, I just think about so much, just the magic and the mystery of the world that is. You know, there's not a day goes by that I don't walk by a plant or a flower or a tree and go, oh my God, I can't believe that you just like manifest, you know, in this design, in this pattern, and it's so sophisticated, and it's, you communicate in a way that's way beyond my ability to interpret you at all. And how perfect that the sun goes up and down every day. Like, you know, it's just the perfection and the majesty of creation. And I have zero comprehension for people who take it for granted, for people who are invested in the mentality of things like synthetic biology, like thinking, oh, we can improve upon what's here. We can make better things than what nature. I mean, I actually heard that come out of someone's mouth. And so those are the things that I think about. And I said, this is the most precious thing. And I can't believe that I have the privilege to be here. And I brought other human beings into the world to be here at this time, not on accident. I know we were called to be here at this time, to be part of this great turning, to be part of this just transition into a new world. I believe in the sixth sun, you know, el sexto sol de los Mexica, you know. I believe in the vision of the great turning that the Mayan prophecy projects, not about the year 2012, but about the 13 years on either side of that, that there was this whole opening for us. It's like, oh, opportunity to change, you know, all the eclipses and the structural breakdowns that they create opportunity for. I'm getting into my spiritual understanding of things, but that is how I understand the world. We have an opportunity, but it's gonna, you know, energetically it's shifting also. And so that's what I think about. I said, we have to make enough change on time for my children and everyone's children and everyone who's going to be here 7 generations from now to still be able to awe at all the things that I awe at, to have community and family surroundings that make them feel safe and held and loved. And so we have to do all of this and anything possible to make that reality.
That's beautiful. I love how like love and wonderment or enchantment kind of seems to like underpin your vision and all the beautiful work that you do and that you have done. And I just want to say thank you so much for spending this hour with me and kind of telling me about the work that you do. I personally find it so inspiring, and I hope that listeners will head towards Movement Generation to find out more about the work, Justice and Ecology Project, and see how they can support. And I think the other really important thing is that, you know, movement building, community organizing, food growing, whether that's like urban food farms or like more in more rural situations, like these are things that we can actively participate, that most people can actively participate, then it's not elitist, and like that's where I think like the power really lies to kind of move forward. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christabel, for your time and your thoughtful questions. I appreciate you.